Speech Pitch by Iska Sak.
Hi there, and welcome to Speech Pitch by Iska Sak. I'm Spyretta Leivaditi.
And I am Pascal, and we will be your hosts for this episode. Today we are very happy to have Titouan Parcollet. Titouan is a research scientist at the Samsung AI Center in Cambridge and an adjunct researcher at the Cambridge Machine Learning Systems Lab from the University of Cambridge. Further, he is an associate professor on leave from the Laboratoire Informatique d'Avignon and Avignon Université. His current research focuses on self-supervised and representation learning and on continual learning. He played an instrumental part in the development of SpeechBrain and Pytorch-Kaldi. Welcome to Speech Pitch, Titouan.
Hello, thank you for having me here. It's great.
So let's jump into some background questions. Titouan, you have such an interesting profile with various research projects and a vivid career trajectory. We noticed that you started your university level studies at the age of 16. How did you manage to adapt to the changing environment between high school and the shift in your personal and academic aspects in university?
Okay, well, that's an interesting first question. I was not expecting this. That's good. So I'd say that, well, age isn't really the most important variable here, because I think different people will handle things coming at them in life differently without any regard to the age. So I think I entered the university with the same mindset than anyone that would be maybe 18 or something, a normal age, let's say. So I think this hasn't played any role in how I entered university. And I think back then I was like most teenagers and wondering what I wanted to do in life. Like in high school, I was doing something linked to, well, it was a very specific high school that was focusing on the science of agronomical science, like harvesting, things like this. So it was nothing linked to computer science at all. And I think I just went for the University of Avignon because there was some computer science degree that I wanted to try out because some people in my family was doing this and I was interested, but I didn't know really what I wanted to do. And so, yeah, I just arrived here at the age of 16 and you had people that were in their, I don't know, maybe 30 years old or things like this, right? So it's a big change, I guess. But at the same time, the university is moment where everything is very open, right? So I think age doesn't really matter when you arrive here, especially for the first years of the university in France in particular. I guess it depends where you arrive. I guess if you arrive in Cambridge or some top tier university, maybe the overall feeling is different. But in France, since it's somehow free, it's not really free, but it is free, let's say, compared to other places, you have lots of different people. So you just arrive in a huge pot of hundreds or thousands of students that are all different backgrounds, different ages. So you're not really noticeable, right? It's not like if you have any specificity, let's say, to you, it won't be noticed. You will find people that you will like, you will find people that you will hate. Yeah. And just start from here. And it's a new way of learning. University is very different from high school, I'd say.
Yeah.
So it wasn't much of a huge thing, just a new thing, let's say.
Exactly. I understand what you mean. Actually, that was my first idea, that you were able to jump to a university at 16. It also meant another type of maturity. The reason I asked this question, it was like how emotionally also ready you were, or did you exactly know what you wanted to do, or if you had someone to advise you what to do.
No.
So that was the main reason behind all of these.
I think it happened just like most of the students that I've seen. Some people know already what they want to do, right? Like they are just like, I don't know, 12. They know exactly what they want to do. The trajectory is done. Some other people don't have the choice, unfortunately, just because parents decide for them somehow, or life decided for them as well. But for most of us, I guess, it's just like, I have no idea what I will be doing. So I will just try this and see what happens. And this is, I just entered. So yeah, as you said, like I was 16. meaning I had some, maybe it means that I had some facilities or things like this where it was easier for me to do things linked to study, but that's not even really true, because in high school I had terrible grades and it was just working when I needed to just go for the next year, and that's it. So yeah, I mean, just like everyone else, I just arrived at the uni wondering what I would do in my life. and
Yeah.
And it's been like, I haven't found out that I wanted to, well, I mean, it took me more than 5 years to ended up saying, okay, research is maybe interesting. Like, I didn't know I wanted to do research before the first internship I did after my master's. So, I mean, take your time.
Yeah, it's a good call. And we will get, of course, to that very interesting first internship, I guess, after your master's too. But let's linger there a bit. So after you graduated with your master's, what were your considerations in pursuing a PhD?
Okay, so let's say that, so for the entirety of my education, so bachelor, master, financially speaking, I was in a situation where it's not easy. So I've been lucky enough to be in I don't know if it's lucky enough, but to me it was lucky enough to be in a relationship with someone for forever since high school, but we only had one salary to leave. So this means that for both the bachelor and master, we had to find ways. I mean, buying food, staying alive. The entirety of my master, I did some, let's say, some sort of sandwich program. So you just go to a company 2 weeks and then you go back to the university 2 weeks. And so you get a salary because of this, which is great because you get some professional experience, because it's of course you are doing, I don't know, back then it was software engineering that I was doing in this company. So you're actually applying things that you're learning at the university. And so at the end of this, I have tried a few different companies, small ones, very big ones. I was working for Atos, which is, I think, quite a big company back then. And I realized that I did not like this world somehow. My job was not something I enjoyed back then. So I wanted to try something different. And weirdly enough, in this university, back then, it's not the case anymore, but there was a big barrier or something we didn't know what was happening in the laboratory of computer science. This is not something a lot of students understand, because in many universities, master's programs are very linked with researchers. And what being a researcher in computer science means is also often discussed with the students. But back then in this university, it was not the case. So to me, people working in the laboratory, it was mysterious. I didn't understand what this means. I would just imagine people working there just like actual scientists with a white coat and things like this. I didn't know what computer science was, in fact. So I just decided after this bad professional experience in the industry to try something else. So I said, let's try it with an internship. And this research internship led to a PhD offer. And then from there, so the motivation was try something different, plus money, because I needed money back at this moment as well.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the PhD topic and why you chose to work on that specific topic? Was it related with what you had done before? Was it linked somehow?
Okay, sure. So the PhD topic was quaternion neural network. So hypercomplex numbers applied to neural network. And you have to put this in context. At this point in time, TensorFlow was there, not PyTorch.
Yeah.
And so neural networks were not something big. It was starting to be big, but not something big. And so why I got interested into this, I have no idea, to be honest. I got attracted to an internship that was already on this topic. And to attract me, I remember very well that my advisor just said, oh, you will have GPUs. And I was a nerd back then. I was wondering, why the heck should I have GPUs? What's the point of having GPUs? And then I realized, of course, it was to do compute. But I was just excited about the fact that I could play with, well, it was Titan X, I think, or Titan, or even just Titan GPUs, I don't remember, old ones. And this is what attracted me here. And then during the internship, I just discovered what research is. And it was very exciting. And I would say I would certainly not be as excited today if I had to start again in deep learning. Because when I started, I knew nothing about neural networks, right? My whole bachelor and master was software engineering. I didn't know anything about neural networks, even deep learning or machine learning. not much. Machine learning a bit about k-means and things like this, but that's it. So it was a whole new universe open to me, and also coding-wise, because I had to do everything. Like the first quaternion neural network that I did was in CUDA and C++, right? I had to implement the forward and backward myself, because TensorFlow was trash to do what I wanted to do, to be honest. And then, of course, I switched to PyTorch and so on. But it was just like, I decided to go for this because it was new.
Yeah.
Exciting, very exciting. And freedom as well. You feel like you're free, right? Like when you start a PhD, you're like, wow. So it was not about, oh, this is quaternion, I love quaternion. No, I had no idea what quaternions were when I started. I knew complex numbers, but not hyper complex numbers. But yeah, the motivation was, that's going to be fun, basically, I think.
Very cool. And that was an internship that you did at the end of your master's
Yeah.
and right before your PhD, right? Okay.
Yes.
And how did you then end up in the field of automatic speech recognition? Was that the thing during your PhD already, or did it come later?
So the Laboratoire of Avignon has a very, very, very strong expertise in ASR. So my advisor was the first one, so the main one, was one of the creator of Spiral. So I don't know if it's the name, but that's basically an old ASR toolkit that was there at the same time than HDK and CMU Sphinx, things like this. And so at first, I was not doing ASR. During the internship, it was not ASR. And at the beginning of the PhD, it was not ASR. I think it was just, we were doing document classification, I think. So it was text. But then I ended up at Mila, right? Working with Yoshua Benjo. And I met Mirko Ravanelli. And then I realized, okay, there is an application here. It seems that the code is here. I just have to put my quaternion number in the middle. Maybe it makes sense to do it. Let's do it. And for the PhD, maybe I should mention that I did something very special that I think if people have the opportunity to do this, they should do it. At least in France, it's quite common, but maybe not elsewhere. But it's what we call CIFRE PhD, which is basically a PhD that is paid by a company.
Oh.
And you work both for the company and the lab. So you have a better salary, that's the first thing, which is very important because PhD stipend might sometimes be very low. And also you get, if you find a right collaboration, this can be hard, you are also left with some practical use cases of applying deep learning in a company while you are learning about it, which is great, which is very important. I've been lucky with this because I've been given space to do this. And the interest of the company was speech recognition as well. So back then it was Kaldi. So I learned about Kaldi during this period of time. Nightmare. But it's
Yes.
we all love and hate Kaldi at the same time, I guess. And this is where I started. But yeah, so that was just a quick parenthesis. This is a great thing to do.
And just a quick question, which company did you work for at that time for your PhD?
Yeah, it was called, it is still called Orkis,
Orkis it was, okay.
which is a French smallish company doing data asset management. And they have some tools that needs to do ASR, either for subtitles or just automatically classify documents, for instance.
And how easy was to combine your research with the Mila internship?
Okay.
It wasn't easy.
No. I've been lucky to have a very good supervisor during my PhD. And the focus for him was to make sure that my career will follow a nice trajectory. And so he would think every single time we had to make a choice about what will maximize my chance of being able to decide what I want to do next. In a sense that what you want to do is open as many doors as possible, right, for your students. This is what I focus on now that I am advising. And he was doing this back then. So for Mila, what happens is just, we knew we wanted to stick to quaternion numbers. We've been lucky enough to have a contact with Yoshua Benjo. Back then it was Renato De Mori, right? Which was the advisor of Yoshua, but was also professor at Avignon. And Yoshua was interested by the quaternion numbers. He was curious, but he didn't have any idea about speech recognition. So when I arrived, the plan was to find someone that was doing an application where I could put my quaternion numbers in the middle. The plan was to collaborate, find someone to collaborate with. So find an application domain and apply the quaternion numbers. It was not Mirko at first. It was another set of people from Mila as well that were also doing speech. I don't know, a lot of people were doing speech in Yoshia's group at this point in time, I think. And since I started doing speech there, well, of course, Mirko showed up at some point because he was starting a postdoc there as well, and we ended up working together. But the focus was right at the beginning of the internship, find someone to collaborate with and work with them. Because if you are going to do an internship in a lab, which is different from a company, working on your side alone makes no sense. There is no point in this. Like it's just stay in your laboratory. So first thing, find someone that you like and work with them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that sounds like really the right strategy there. And how did you secure this opportunity of working at Mila itself then? Was it something your supervisor already pointed you toward, or how did it come about?
I guess I got lucky. Just like, you need luck. I mean, in this field, you need luck. Work is not sufficient. Everyone is working hard. As I said, Renato was interested in my topic, and we've had 1 or 2 papers together before. So before this internship. And so I just talked to Yoshia, and I ended up asking him officially, can I come and do an internship into your lab? And we had an interview. I screwed up the interview big time, but I got the internship in the end still. And so that's how it ended up. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's super cool to hear, especially that it didn't go. I mean, usually, of course, you look at the CV and you see, of course, yeah, like he went to Mila, just like this show, like no thing. But that's really, really cool to hear this as a background. And I think like luck is such a big factor in many career opportunities and stuff. So that's good to highlight here as well. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think I've been very lucky because, so the good thing is like this opened a lot of doors for Avignon in Mila for some reason, for me going there. We've sent already many people now to Mila since then. And so it was a great connection for the lab as well to be made, not only me. And from a personal note, I'm really happy that I've been able to be there at this period of time, because that's when Mila started to explode. And it was really the old school where it was full of nerds in crappy offices. Like we didn't have any window. It was terrible. Like, you just enter a room with very old lights. The desks were all different. The chairs were not stable. It was a nightmare, but full of people that were just devoted to make deep learning work somehow. And it was not like, oh, everyone is using PyTorch or everyone is using this tool. It was plenty of people doing weird stuff, trying to make it work. So it was very, very fun. And I think now that Mila is huge, right? It's massive. It's a new building. Everything looks like a brand new company. Maybe it's a bit less fun than what it was before.
Yeah, there's to the guys working there. But of course, yeah, I can see it's always cool to be a pioneer of something in this respect for sure, yeah.
It's the competition, I think, mostly the problem. Because back then, there was no competition. And now, I think it's insane. Like, the competition might be just insane for people joining Mila, even now.
Being in academia usually entails mentoring and being mentored. Did you have a mentor or mentors? And I guess maybe your supervisor, because you spoke so nicely about him, maybe he was your mentor, and how important it was to have someone like this in your life?
Right. So for my internship and PhD, I've had 2 different supervisors. One was more of an administrative supervisor. So it was the professor. Because you need a specific... So being an associate professor in France is not sufficient for you to be able to advise a PhD student.
Ah, okay.
You need another... You actually need to do another PhD to be able to do... Then we call it HDR, just like for TVs. but then you can just advise PhD yourself. But so I had this guy helping me. So his name was Georges Linares. He's now, I think, the president of Avignon University.
Whoa.
It was not back then, but he was helping me with all the admin stuff, mostly, not really the research and day-to-day activities. And then I had my real advisor, let's say, whose name is Mohamed Morshid. He's an associate professor in Avignon. And he is the person that one of the person that have had the most impact in my life, all time, I think. And with respect to your question, I think for a PhD, the most important thing outside of what you are willing to do during your PhD is the advisor. They will define it's crazy to say this, but they will define where you will end up after a PhD. And I've seen terrible PhD advisors leading to terrible PhD situations. It can go really bad, right? A PhD can go really bad in the sense that you can go into depression, you can be harassed, because some academics are not nice people. Others are super good. I mean, and people that will support you, and it all comes down to your personality, I think, and finding a good match. I mean, my advisor was someone that was asking me to do a lot of things. Like, he would be on my office every single day to see if I'm on track, to see not to judge the amount of work I'm doing, just to see if I need help.
Nice.
Right? And give an advice. And he would be by my side every single time I needed to take a decision that will impact my career. And it would make me realize how important taking this decision now, thinking about it properly, will have an impact on my career, which is something a lot of PhD advisors don't do. They just are here to say, okay, the next research question you should solve this is how you learn how to write a paper, and that's it. And even for papers writing, for instance, it would be like the first papers you can see switching from rewriting everything to letting me having more and more freedom over the writing of the paper and helping me in every single paper. It's not like I will just read it at the end. No, every single sentence he will help me with writing it. And so it might be too much for some students, right? I've had students that required me to do this, but also others where I needed to let them be, right? So most important thing indeed is find an advisor that suits your personality and the way of working, because this has a crazy impact on your future and even on yourself. I mean, if you end up with a bad one, like an actual bad human, not even just a bad advisor, a bad human, it will have strong consequences on your mental health.
So actually what you are saying here is also that when you are having an interview for a PhD, you're not only the only person that is interviewing, you're also interviewing the people that you're going to work with. So no matter how much you like a position, you also need to make sure also during the interview, where are you get yourself into? This is how important it is.
Yes, but so this is tricky. I really think if you can do an internship, really, like, it's critical. And even if it will just postpone the start of your PhD and you're just done and you want to, well, first, if you are just done with education, just don't go for a PhD. But doing an internship is so important. And if in the internship you're not sure that you are happy with what is going on, consider doing something else or find someone else. It's fine. Because that's 3 to 4 years of your life, sometimes 5 to 6. That's very important. And that's like some crazy intense years of your life. So you have to be sure about the move you're doing. So yes, often people say it should be a speed dating. I think it shouldn't be a speed dating between you and your advisor. You should take the time to learn how they are working and what they're willing to do for you. Talk to other PhD students. Talk to postdocs. Not the postdocs of the advisor, because of course they will just tell you this person is great, blah, blah, blah. Talk to other people within the lab. Try to find people that don't necessarily, it's very hard sometimes, I know, but that don't necessarily like this person, if it can happen, to see what they think about them. Because you might discover, talking to PhD students, I think, is the best thing, and not necessarily the PhD student of the advisor itself, or it can be PhD students from other advisors sometimes, because you might get insight on personal things, like this person is actually harassing somehow the students. This person is not taking care of the student. This person is not doing meetings, these kind of things. And all this you will never know from an interview, right? Never. So dig for answers. And also, I mean, a lot of older professors, they don't like being in this position of being interviewed as well. Even if they are nice people, nice professors, it's just that it has never been like this. And it's just that now it's so competitive that it has become like this. And also PhD students are more and more aware of all the problems that can arise. from a PhD. So they might not like this, even though they are great advisors, right? So try to ask questions around. Yeah, really ask questions around.
What I was actually meaning to say was that during the interviews, you have the chance to ask your own questions. So you can plan probably good questions that they could give you information about the people that you're going to work with to understand their expectations from you. And, to understand maybe better if they fit the way you're working and if you fit their way of working. So, yeah. And that was why I said maybe also you're interviewing them. Don't forget to be prepared in these type of interviews.
It's complex. I think it's a complex point in life when you have to search for a PhD.
Yeah.
Because, it can be omega competitive, right? Like, I don't know, let's say you are competing for Cambridge or some university in the States that are top of the line. Then you can't really be picky somehow, right? Unless you are absolutely exceptional and you already have 20 papers and I don't know.
Yeah.
But most of the time it's not the case, right? So it's hard to do this kind of things. But if you are... Okay, so let me put this straight. I'm almost tempted to say that the university doesn't matter. I come from a university that is basically unknown. You wouldn't even find it in any Shanghai ranking. I ended up working with Yoshua and to Cambridge, Oxford, and now I'm in a okay position, I guess, in a nice lab, right? This is thanks to my advisor. So the relationship you will build with your advisor is much more important than the name of the university, even if the name of the university will help, of course, obviously. But not suffering for 5 years and ended up in a nice position is better than suffering for 5 years and ended up in a still okayish position.
Absolutely.
So and professors in smaller universities might be more willing to take more time with you and discuss with you, understanding what you want for the PhD. And with them, you can be open during the interview, right? If you go to your PhD advisor and it's not a top of the line university, then you can start saying more things about yourself as well. Because if you go to Cambridge and say, I don't know what I want to do, PhD advisor will be, okay, I have 10 other PhD students that know exactly what they want to do.
Exactly.
But if you go to a bottom university and say, okay, I want to explore research, I want to see if I can do this, but I don't know what I want to do next, or I don't know what I want to do as a topic, you will see how they react, and then you can be yourself much more easily, much less pressure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So relatedly, maybe to transition a bit to the other end of the bargain, right? Like you're now an associate professor, still associated with Avignon. And if I got it right, that means that you would be teaching for the University of Avignon now, like being in a similar position also at supervising PhD students and teaching classes. Is that correct?
Okay, so I was, right? I'm on leave, which means I am not. I am still on paper, but I'm not doing any job for Avignon University anymore.
Then you were. Let us rephrase it. You were.
Yes. I was an associate professor for 2 years. So I did full normal associate professor work in France. And then I took this leave period for 5 years that you can do in France. And so you're basically entirely disconnected. It's just that your position is held in place. If you want to come back, you can do it. So I'm not teaching for Avignon anymore. I still have research connection with them, of course, because you have like PhD students that you started to advise. So you keep advising them, or even in terms of research projects or things like this, of course, you still always have connections, but not working for Avignon University anymore.
Okay, so that's interesting to know. So how would you say then nowadays, are you actively supervising? As you said, like you have some PhD students that you're still supervising. Are you actively now still?
Yes.
Okay, so you're still having PhD students that get supervised by you. And are you also still teaching courses at university?
I was in Cambridge last year up until I have now this health condition as well. So now I cannot teach anymore. But yes, in Cambridge last year I taught one course as well, which is much more enjoyable than having to teach so many courses in France. So this year I won't be teaching, I think.
That's of course super unfortunate, but would be very interesting to learn about just roughly your approach on teaching and how it was then being in this situation, like on one hand as a PhD supervisor, on the other hand as someone who has to mediate the knowledge. So how was that for you, that experience?
Right. So I've started teaching very early because remember, I said that I needed money. So I started teaching when I was in the second year of my bachelor, where I was given the opportunity to teach to first years things that were linked to using Word, Excel, this kind of things. And so already back then it was hard for me because I was only 17, right? And you would have students that are basically up to 25, 30. I mean, so I learned very quickly that teaching is not simple. And it's not just getting like, I don't know. I come from a place where socially speaking, it's not super educated, right? And so you somehow connect teaching to getting respected by your students, which is it's not properly true. It's not 100% true, right? Getting respected by your students is important, but the way you earn this respect is not clear. It was not clear for me when I started teaching. And I quickly realized when I started to do real teaching, so during my PhD, where we could give some tutorials and things like this, that it's only based on how you treat your students and how you treat the course that you teach. If it's not interesting, if you're not interested, student will know this and they will start not being interested in what you're doing and not respect who you are as a teacher and who you are as a person as well, potentially as well, because if you're not acting well during your course, of course, it will reflect. And I realized this is just that so in France, you have to do 200 hours of equivalent teaching during 1 year. So it can be many things. Like these 200 hours can be from one-on-one supervision to actual lectures. And so I had courses that I liked, that I could create, actually only one, and 4 different ones that I was not really interested in.
Yeah.
And one that was absolutely not at all interested in, and not only not interested, but also not competent to teach this course. But that's how it is in France because we don't have any money. So we just do as we can. And so the student themselves told me later on that they were seeing a completely different person when I was teaching the course that I made. And I wanted to teach, the things that I was interested in teaching and the courses that I was not interested in teaching. And that if they did not have me in both of these courses, then the perception of my teaching capabilities or even the perception of myself would be entirely different to them. So my approach to teaching now is only teach things that you are interested in. Because if you are interested in whatever you do, it will end up okay. Well, some people just can't teach, right? Some people, when they try to teach, it's just a nightmare. You don't understand anything what they're saying.
Yeah.
But if already you are in the direction of teaching something that you are interested in, it should work. Like it will be, because you will have the energy. You will be happy to spend this energy doing it when you are going to teach. Like doing your lectures is really tiring, right? Like when you end up doing 3 hours of lectures, you're wasted after this, really. And so if you're not going there with the will of saying, I'm so happy about teaching this, will never work. Like you will have put no energy in this and the student will get bored and it will be terrible. So just do something that you're interested in. That's my first approach to teaching. I think the biggest thing for me is this. Then I'd say try. It's hard. I'm not an expert on teaching. A lot of people are actually doing incredibly good courses out there, and I'm just trying to get inspirations from them for the way you interact with the student, the way you present the material and things like this. I guess now the hardest part is to, I think now, if I had to construct a course entirely, it would be to find a way to differentiate myself from internet. Like you can learn anything on internet so easily. So like when you teach at Cambridge, you're like, I need to put up something that justifies not only the fees that the student have paid, but also the fact that this is a top 3 world university. And how can I differentiate myself against, I don't know, deeplearning.ai, Coursera, all this, just on YouTube, right? Like you have so many good courses now that's the second hardest point. So the first one is find a topic that you like. The second point is find a reason for your course to be good, in a sense that what's the difference between this and something that they could get on the internet. And if you really just end up saying to the student the same thing than what is on the internet without creating any interactions between you and them, then there is no point in you teaching. You need to create something that will link the students to you and make them ask questions, make them try things and fail, such that you can help them correct their mistakes. If you don't do this, there is no point for you to even exist. They can just use ChatGPT and learn things.
Yeah, no, super cool. And thanks so much for this overview. I mean, that's, I think, highlighting all the challenges that you have nowadays quite prominently. And teaching is not easy if you have large language models around, basically. So for the next part, we would want to address your current research, or like the research projects that you have been working on a bit. And maybe we can start with nice things in life, basically. So come to your favorite projects. So are there any particular research projects or studies that close to your heart that you enjoyed a lot working on, or where you have some PhD students that you're very happy with your work? I mean, of course, not neglecting all the other PhD students, but if there's some highlights, some research spotlight that you want to shed on a nice project that you're having going.
Right. Well, that's a multiple question somehow. So maybe I can start by being depressing a bit. I'm starting to be less and less interested in the different trends and topics that are revolving around speech and deep learning, which might be linked to the industry where I am, or just the things that I am playing with on a daily basis in terms of research. Now, on what I've been interested in recently, I guess all the topics that my PhD students are doing are something that are interesting to me. I have right now 2 PhD students, and hopefully a third one will come in September. And so one is working on efficient SSL, the other one is working on expressivity for translation, so speech-to-speech translation with expressivity transfer as well. And I think the 2 topics are very interesting. The 2 topics are hard, and the problem, again, is the 2 topics are facing the same issues that are, in principle, just scale the size of the model, scale the size of the data, and it will work at some point. Which is quite boring, but this is what the trend is following. And so I am in a place where I'm trying to find something interesting to do. So I think this is maybe even more interesting in terms of saying to people, we are not passionate about what we're doing all the way during our careers, right? Sometimes you're a bit lost. And being sick recently clearly highlighted to me a crazy part of our society when it comes to research, because I realized that some disease might have maybe 5 or 6 million of fundings for like 10 years, while 5 or 6 millions will be what a medium AI company would spend in 1 year doing what? Doing a emoji generator or something like this?
Yeah,
right?
Crazy, yeah.
So finding a topic of interest is very hard. So what am I interested in right now in research? To me, the interesting thing would be to understand self-supervised learning. That's my topic of interest right now. I'm not necessarily doing this because, I mean, Samsung can be interested in other topics as well, and I have to answer this need as well. And understanding this also requires, so solving this question of understanding SSL properly, self-supervised learning properly, requires a lot of background theory, which might be hard for some PhD students. So the PhD student I have working on this right now is working more on the, for now, it has been working more on the empirical aspect of this question, and hopefully we will dive into theory soon. But that's the only, really, that's maybe terrible, that's the only thing I'm excited about right now, like trying to answer this question of self-supervised learning for speech, because we just don't do it properly. That's maybe my advice on this research question here. It would be try to find something that people are not, at least you think, people are not doing properly. And trust me, in this area of era of LLMs and speech LLMs and stuff like this, people are doing a lot of things not properly. And so you can try to fix this. Sorry for the dog on the background. This might happen sometimes. But so yeah, I don't have to answer. Terrible, depressing. I'm trying to find an interesting path. The only one I have right now is efficient self-supervised learning in terms of research. All the rest, of course, we are all investigating, trying to read about speech LLMs, interactions about LLM and speech, or even ASR or things like this. It quickly gets boring, unfortunately.
Well, thank you so much for your answer. And I can totally understand and relate with you, to be honest. You already mentioned that you were always with one foot in the industry and one in academia. Could you describe us any challenges or adjustments you had to do for these two environments?
Yes, they are very different. And so for the people but basically I wrote a very long piece about the difference between academia and industry. It's not a paper, it's not a blog post, it's just like a document that is on my website now. It was on Twitter, but I just removed my Twitter account, so now I guess it's not visible anymore. But I wrote a paper comparing the industry and academia in different blocks, whether it is like salary, research, freedom, these kind of things. And so these days, academia and the industry, they have different ways of working. And in the end, you always have to compromise on something. But the good thing about the industry, I think, is that that's weird to say, but you will feel more free in the industry. And so in terms of compromise, when I say more free, it's not about the research topics, it's about a human being. Academia takes your soul. Takes everything from you. But yeah, so to adapt, I'd say that maybe it's weird, but the biggest adaptation I have had to do between academia and the industry is learning to stop. It's weird maybe, but learning to stop is the weirdest part. And it's hard. It's also hard because we know very well that we exist. In this day, we exist if you want to be successful in the definition of finding the work you want, having a good salary and stuff. In this field, you need to stay at the top all time, which means most likely you will have to work a lot. And also most likely you will have to never take a bad decision. As I said at the beginning, this is very important. When you take a decision, you need to think so many times about, but what if, right? And so this is something that academia teach you. If you just do industry, you will never really think like this, because you will understand that every time you get a promotion, it's all political, right? And it's just because you've been lucky to be in the right project that will be commercialized, so you will highlight it. But so many people in the lab will also deserve to be promoted. It's just political. It's not really something that you can do. So you can learn about all this politics and how it works to get more chances. But it's so much narrower. It's narrower compared to the academia, where you have so many variables that you need to understand. So that's the main difference that I had to adjust to, is that you have to slow down, which is weird somehow, because you feel like all the things you've built, all the things you've worked so hard to achieve, they don't care. They don't care at all about it, right? And so, that's the biggest thing, I guess.
That's very cool for you to mention, or to also portray in this way. And I think we can also go toward SpeechBrain and these achievements that you for sure have in your CV in this regard as well later on. But I think this is quite a good place. Maybe we have it on our list for later, but we could just interject here now, because what you're addressing is, regarding academia and industry on one hand, but also maybe touches on the general work-life balance and the well-being that you have while having such a crazy career as you do, for sure. So do you have any particular input? You have the statement from you is now like, don't do academia, but go toward industry, have a healthier, better freedom and detachment from too heavy things. But like, especially for work-life balance, what are your coping mechanisms or your advice that you can give there also to young researchers in particular?
Okay. No, so I'm not saying go to industry instead of academia. I think it's very linked to the personality. I've met people that are made for academia, and I think I am as well. But as I said, the financial situation has always been an issue for me. It's still now. And that's why I'm sticking within the industry, right? Because in academia, of course, you're poor, right? It's just until in some countries it's fine. If you go to Switzerland and other places like this, it's fine. But in most countries, compared to the industry, it's like, and including the UK, even though you could think Cambridge is nice, no, compared to the money you get in the industry, it's peanuts. But so in terms of work-life balance, what I can say, maybe I don't know, not a lot of people say this, and I'm not proud of this, but I burned out 3 times. during my PhD and my first years of associate professors. And I'm someone that is well aware of the importance of mental health. So I've been following people. I've been asking help from professionals for a long period of time across my life because I think it's very important to maintain a nice mental health state. It's just as important as physical. And unfortunately, I think the academic path is absolutely not ready to teach students to deal with this. Absolutely not. And I've seen so many PhD students and young professors being crushed by depression, by anxiety, these two things are already quite big, I'd say. Like when depression is not funny to have. When you have this, you're just wasted for maybe years, right? And it will take also years to recover from this. And sometimes you never recover as well. So work-life balance is something personal, but is also something you need to figure out quickly. And I don't think there is anything else than, just like in video games, but the wording is very poor. We call this die and retry, but just forget the die. It's just fail and retry, right? Because obviously when you will have an ERIPS deadline or an ICML deadline, whatever paper deadline, and you have your idea and you want it to work, you will push hard, you will work like crazy. And if you are an associate professor, you have this grand deadline that you will have to push for, and you will push like crazy, work overtime, work during the night, during the weekend, have during moments where you are with your family, just taking your laptop and checking mails and doing things, right? Some people do this their entire life without any problems because that's how they were. Others don't. And do not assume because some are capable of doing this that you are, and that's okay if you're not. I was not able to do it. I did it for many years. It sorry for the word again, but it fucked me up pretty badly. I mean, when this strike, right, when you get hit by this kind of depression or crash or whatever, you cannot work or do anything or function normally. You're suffering physically and mentally for a month, and you have to stop working. And it's not good for your career either. So work-life balance is important, but it's not something you can define equally for everyone, I think. So you will have to try, work more. If you don't feel right, work less. That's as simple as that, I think. And yeah, that's my piece of advice.
Thanks for sharing this insight, because I kind of feel it's not that often, like we don't hear that very often from people out there. And personally, I always felt kind of the pressure and the peer pressure of like, hey, why you are leaving so early? And I remember myself saying to my colleague, because I finished all my tasks and left like boom, mic drop, Spyretta, and left, So I can totally understand what you're saying, and thanks for saying those things, because there are a lot of people that also believe that, oh, what is going to change? I don't understand what depression is, or I don't understand why I have to talk to someone, or why I need help. So yeah, I guess a very positive thing that you have to ask for help.
You're right, and one thing to remember is that if you get terrible to say again, but if you get an older advisor or supervisor, they don't understand this from the work. They might have struggled with things in life, just like anyone else. So they might just understand what depression is. But the fact that it comes from your PhD and stuff, they don't understand, really. Because when they were PhD students and things like this, it was so much easier, right? I can just relate to France, but getting an associate professorship position in France 20 years ago, it was crazy simple, right? Now it's not even, we couldn't call it competitive. It's just crazy. It's really crazy. The pressure is very hard. So if you're not feeling well, talk with professionals. I mean, that's the best thing. I think a really good piece of advice is like, if you're not feeling well, take some time out. When I say out, it's like you cut everything. You just leave your phone, you leave everything, and you go somewhere in some place for a few hours, and you try to figure out what's wrong. If you can't, seek some help. That's it. If you can't figure it out by just taking time for yourself, it means you need help, and that's fine. But it's very important to do it.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think it's super good to have this kind of input. I was also about to ask you, like, if you have some advice, right? Like, as you said, take professional help. Don't hesitate. Try to overcome the stigma, right? Like in some areas, it's of course still stigmatized that if you take this action, I mean, the consequences that you have to deal with later on are way more severe than just jumping over your shadow. And
you cannot escape the workplace. The workplace is something that is built with capitalism in mind. So even from nice people, you will get questions or jokes or things that are not meant to be bad or not like mean, let's say, but they just end up being when you just add them all together. So Yeah, I mean, work-life balance is important. But it's also true that, unfortunately, if you want to succeed in your PhD, you will have to work really hard, really.
Yeah.
Or if you are like a genius. I wasn't. And I mean, most of us aren't, I guess.
Yeah.
So, you will have to work hard. But to work hard, be careful about what you're doing. And especially if you're alone. If you don't have anyone sharing your life with you, or friends or family or things like this. In this particular case, be very careful about this and seek help.
So how do you do it nowadays? Do you have some routines in place to keep you from falling into that pit again? Like, do you have some particular time that you force yourself basically to take off for your personal life? Or do you have some other mechanisms that you found for yourself that work?
Yes, these days my health, I'm so bad that it's like it sometimes becomes impossible to work physically. So this is helping a lot. Somehow I've really learned this when I started to be sick of, okay, that's a way of stopping when you need to stop. Because even when I joined the industry, so in the industry first, you have a lot of colleagues that will, it's most weirdly, I guess, it's much more accepted that you stop working when it's not time to work or when you are not feeling well. Like when you're sick, when I was sick, or when I've been taking, holidays and things like this, I would sometimes connect to my work laptop because I was expecting an important mail and I wanted to see the answer or things like this, right? Sometimes you just need to connect, not really work, just connect. And just being connected, I could see my work colleagues saying, "What the heck are you doing here?" So it's the opposite pressure, right? It's like when you're not working, you're supposed to not work, which can become something linked to, okay, this means that when I'm here, I need to work really hard, which is also wrong. It's not like black and white. I think it's a terrible situation for which I am doing a lot of remote work, and this is helping a lot, right? Because when you are doing something interesting, you can work overtime without realizing it. And maybe luckily these days I've been working on things that are not super interesting, so I'm happy when I stop at 5.
Yeah.
But I don't have any piece of advice. The one I could give, maybe, that can help, is to have things you like outside. Because then you will want to do them. It can be video games, I don't know, playing with your pets, reading, anything. And so if you have things that you like on the outside, while you work, you might be thinking, okay, I would love to play, like, for instance, me, it was video games with friends. And so when my friends were not working, and it was like, I don't know, maybe 9 p.m., and I was working, and they would say, hey, what about we do some games of this? And then I would stop working and play with them. So finding habits to do outside of work helps. Yeah. Otherwise, I don't have I know that I have colleagues that are crazy good at this. Like they have a very strict way of thinking about this. So it's like start at this time, end at this time. This is like family time. This is like pet time, and they just stick to this, and it works really well for them. I just can't do this because my calendar is all over the place. I just wake up sometimes at 7, sometimes at 10. I mean, it's a nightmare. Yeah. So I cannot have something like this. But my only advice would be find something you like to do outside of work and you really like, not just something, okay. The gym, for instance, I've had a few colleagues while I was a PhD student that were going to the gym. And this is helping because you need to do it every 2 days or something at the same time, every time, right? So it's helping a lot. It's like, okay, I don't care. I'm not done today with what I've done. Don't care. It's like push-ups times. I just close the laptop and I move forward.
Yeah. No, I see what you mean. Actually, for me too, it was weird when I was even a student. According to my background, it was a quite rough time. And I remember myself, I was like, I don't have any more energy to continue studying or doing this assignment. So I just was going to watch tennis in a local park, and then people start teaching me there. So after a while, you could see me that I was like, every time my brain was giving me the signal, it's not a good time to keep studying. I was grabbing my racket and I was hitting the wall for 3 hours. And then the next day, it was perfect.
Yeah, I mean,
all the tension was out.
Sports help a lot. That's true. Sports is maybe one of the best I should stop saying hobbit, right? It's not the same thing. Habit that you can have outside of work. It's one of the best for sure.
Maybe just one thing related, I mean, not strictly with work-life balance, but maybe something also from personal growth. And on that line is how, like, you can be also in a situation, as you said, like if you have academia and you have this competition and everyone is super smart, maybe you're sitting in a conference, you're seeing a presentation, and like can happen that you end up thinking that you want to ask some question or so, but you assume that this has to be known that you
Imposter syndrome.
Because exactly. I think this is exactly right to that. Like, if did you have this situation, or
right?
Is there something?
Okay, so this is a connection. So this is a nice connection with what has been said previously. So I'm in a position now where I can decide when I can stop working. When you are building your academic career, you feel like you cannot stop ever, because if you stop, you're wasting your time or you're just lagging behind. And this is also part of the fact that some people are just so much better than you that you want to stay working such that you can catch up with them, or with the field even in general, because the field is moving so fast, it's crazy. And so I guess I am fortunate enough now and in the position where I can finally say when I don't feel right, and you mentioned, Spyretta, that sometimes this happens to you, now I can stop. And I know very well that when I was a PhD student, there were times where I wanted to stop and I did not. And for this, I honestly don't have an answer. For this specific case, I still think now, with like retrospectively, I think when you feel like you need to stop, you should stop, really. And most likely also because now the field is so competitive that your success will also be linked to luck and not work only. And so working 5% or 10% less, especially in the moment where your body tells you stop, won't change anything. That's what I would do now. So this is linked to the imposter syndrome, because I wouldn't stop because of it, right? Like if you stop working, it's terrible. And you feel like when you are working up to 9 p.m. in the lab, you feel you're looking cool, right? And if the older seniors, professors see you working so hard, they will be willing to have a high opinion of yourself when you will apply for becoming an academic. And that's true. That's the crazy part about it. That's actually true. It will, being considered as someone that works hard is positive, right? It will help you for the interview. In the industry, people don't really necessarily know you, so it doesn't really matter. But for academia, like the way you are known by others is one of the most important thing with your achievement. But back to the imposter syndrome. Yes. So, I mean, this is like universal. Everyone got it. So when I was in Avignon, right, I felt like I was one of the PhD students that was working the hardest, the most. Not necessarily the most smart one, but I was one of the best in my own view, right? And I wanted to keep this that way. I arrived to Mila, and I felt like I was the worst PhD student existing.
Poor.
I found people that were more knowledgeable about my PhD topic than myself, right? And so what I've learned, and even now I still have this, right? Like I'm in a position where when I'm talking with some of my colleagues that are much better than myself at doing theory, they say things I just don't understand, right? Sometimes we talk all together and I feel like they have to adapt the way they write such that I can understand. But that's not a problem. The real problem is like we see all this as a competition. It is a competition, and it's normal to feel that way, except you really need to force yourself to learn slowly that this is just you being very lucky to find people that are smarter than yourself. Learn from them.
Yes.
If you feel threatened, if you feel like they say, no, you're wrong and prove you wrong, it's so cool. It's so great. Yeah. You say, okay, you are actually right. Thank you for telling me this, and learn from this, right? When now I'm a senior researcher, I write papers, I'm happy about my writing, and I will have my colleague comes and say, I don't understand anything about what you're saying in the section. It hurts. And then he will start rewriting, and I read what he writes, and I'm like, crap, this is great. This is the way it should be written, right? Yeah. So
it says, sorry.
No, just learn to turn this imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
You will have it. It's like that. Everyone has it. But learn to turn this imposter syndromes into something that is like happy, positive. Like you are given the opportunity to learn. That's what matters.
Yeah. It's something that at least this is how I treat my imposter syndrome. Like what I say to myself is, as a child, I was so thrown into competition with my co-students since a very young age, with all these grades and stuff. And at home, it was pressuring. And, at the moment I stepped into the university and I was away from this environment that they were like, of course, they were doing it for the best of me because they wanted wanted me to get into university and do stuff. But at the moment I remember I landed in the university, I said to myself, you know something, I stopped comparing myself with my peers at that point, and I was like, I'm just trying to be the best version of me. So I think this really goes with what you say, because this is the moment I also said, oh, I didn't know, please educate me. So instead of feeling embarrassed, you know, I was like expecting someone else to give me some pointers. If they cannot teach me, give me some pointers, and then I will take over and figure out what was happening. And maybe, yeah, it was like a question that we have for you, but I don't know. I think it feels like you already answered, but maybe you can elaborate more. Like, if there were moments in your life where you felt you were hesitant or doubt to ask stuff, as you mentioned, like when you moved to Mila, how you felt and how you won this fear, because I totally told you my way, but I'm really curious about your way too.
So you never stop. I think, well, I mean, comparing to others is not really a problem per se. It's what it does to you that can be a problem in the way you do it. Because if you follow the academic path and want to become an academic, I've been in the industry only for 2 years now, but up until now, I just wanted to be a good academic, right? So if you follow the academic path, comparison is mandatory in the sense that you need to see who are your competitors, how many citations they get, and all this stuff. And it's threatening sometimes because they just have more. And it's due to so many different factors that you are not in control of. With respect to moments in my life where I feared to ask questions, it's still happening now. I mean, not knowing something is natural. I mean, of course. So yes, even with my colleagues now, when, as I said, like when they say some theory stuff that I don't understand, I ask questions, and the more I ask, the more stupid my questions will become because I realize that I don't understand the basics, right? But that's fine. And it's, I mean, you feel bad. That's natural. It's normal to feel bad, but you should still ask. It's fine. It's just fine. Even in a conference, if you are in a room of course, then it becomes harder. If you are in a RIPS room where you have like 5,000 people, you don't want to ask what is backpropagation, right? I mean, even if you don't know. But to anyone going to a conference, it's normal to not understand. When I go to a conference, if I step out of my comfort zone, I maybe understand only 20% of what I read or hear. And that's normal. And so asking stupid question is fine. And I would even say, if you are in a conference, that the people that are standing next to the poster, that's their job to answer stupid question anyway. So just ask stupid questions.
Just move
fine.
on.
So it happened a lot of times in my life. And at the beginning it was harder because you feel like you shouldn't ask this kind of questions. But they don't in the end, they don't care. I mean, one important thing is something that taught me my advisor is that if you follow the academic path, the first impression is the most important one, and that's true. So when you are doing something for the community, when you are doing a presentation, when you are writing a paper, when you are doing a toolkit, when you are doing these kind of things, the first impression that people will have is the strongest one. Defeating in the future this impression will be very hard, meaning that if it's negative, you will have a very hard time changing this, right? But asking question doesn't really enter here, right? It's different because when you ask a question, or it's not like they will say, okay, this guy is stupid. No, this guy is trying to understand things. So yeah, it's different. I think just ask questions, even if you feel it's normal to feel terrible, but it will get better over time. You will feel more confident about asking stupid questions over time, I think.
Yeah. No, very good point. And transitioning now to a topic relatedly. So you mentioned toolkits there briefly in there. And I think one big thing that comes up when you look at your profile is a small project that got very big, I think. It's called SpeechBrain. So could you please give us a brief overview of this framework from your perspective?
Oh, yes. Sure. It's just, SpeechBrain is just a toolkit that can be used by anyone to do anything that is related to speech technology. So it can go from speech recognition, speech synthesis, speech translation, language modeling, even things that are not necessarily linked to speech directly. You can think of EEG brain signal processing. Language modeling is not speech processing, for instance. But I mean, I'm certainly missing other things like interpretability. It's basically a toolkit that can deal with many sequence to something, and with deep learning in the middle, of course. And it's It's like, well, maybe I don't know exactly who's listening, but maybe they are too young to know about Kaldi. But if they aren't, let's say it's the new Kaldi, we can say, but in a good way. Like think about people have been suffering about Kaldi for a few engineering perks, and we try to solve these problems while keeping all the power of Kaldi on top of it. So I guess now you have a lot of different toolkits that exist, right? You have ESP.NET, you have Nemo, you have Kaldi 2 even, and SpeechBrain. Well, let's say FirstSec as well. These are the main ones. If you think of ones that are able to do a lot of different tasks, you only have then Nemo, SpeechBrain, ESP.NET, and FirstSec. K2 is a bit more limited. And if you think of ones that are actually maintained by people that wish you good, so you remove companies, then you have ESP.NET and SpeechBrain. So when I say wish you good, it's just because for FirstSec and Nemo, they don't really care about the user friendliness. That's not their concern. These are more places where they can expose their work and attract people to use their paper and models, right? Nemo has also very good features for companies that are just wanting to start something. Like they have, when I say start, it's like take a model, do some ASR with it. Nemo is great to do this. If you want to do research, it quickly becomes a nightmare. Same for FirstSec. SpeechBrain has been built with research in mind, which means we try to make it as simple as possible to modify things and try things. That's the heart of SpeechBrain. But by simple, it doesn't mean like bad looking. We wanted to have a good engineering base. And I think we succeeded because a lot of people praise SpeechBrain for the ease of use and customizability of it. And if you want to compare then SpeechBrain and ESP.NET, then it's only this. Like ESP.NET has even more, I think, capacities in terms of different things to do than SpeechBrain. But in my point of view, it's a mess. It's a real mess to play with. ESP.NET is really messy because it was not conceived from the ground up with multitasking in mind. It was conceived with speech recognition, and they keep adding stuff on top of it, which is like in the end it's like a Frankenstein monster. I've used ESP.NET for a few of my papers where before SpeechBrain, and it was really hard to control properly all the parameters of the pipeline to make sure that I was actually doing what I was writing in the paper, which is absolutely not true for SpeechBrain because it's conceived with this in mind. That's what I can say in short about SpeechBrain.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, thanks for here. And I think this is good to have this nice high-level overview here. For the initial idea of it, how did this all happen to come about? I mean, you hinted that you were unhappy with the solutions there, so I think it's probably like one motivation to do something better.
Yeah, I mean, that's always I think that's the main motivation for everyone. It's either doing something that doesn't exist or doing something better than what you are used to play with because you are frustrated. Right. So what the story behind SpeechBrain is we were using Kaldi and then neural networks appeared, and using neural networks in Kaldi is definitely not simple because it was implemented. Well, basically you were relying on what the developers, mostly Dan Povey and his team, were doing. So you couldn't, let's say, I don't know, I had quaternion neural networks and I wanted to apply them to speech. Impossible to do this in Kaldi because there was no easy interface with, back then it was PyTorch when I wanted to try this. And so we said, okay, let's do Pytorch-Kaldi then, which was the first thing we did with Mirko when I was in Mila, which is an interface between Kaldi and PyTorch. But this was designed with the idea of just helping us do our research. A lot of people ended up using this, surprisingly, but the code is a mess, right? I mean, it was not built with a long-term vision. But we realized that a lot of people were using this. And so we just considered, ESP.NET was just at the beginning of it at this point in time. And we said, okay, there is something missing here. Let's try to do it and see how it goes, basically. And the let's try to do it was, let's build a single place that is only in PyTorch that people can play with to do their research on speech. And well, now it's to do their research on conversational AI instead of just speech, but that's how it got created, basically.
Yeah. And how much do you get nowadays to still contribute to the project?
Okay, so maintaining this kind of project is very hard, and there isn't a unique solution that works. So I'm still working on SpeechBrain every single day. So I'm using SpeechBrain in Samsung. Other teams in Samsung are using SpeechBrain, and other teams across the world in Facebook, in NVIDIA, and other companies are using SpeechBrain. Not in terms of production. I'm not talking about production here. I'm talking about just doing research because it's a nice research tool and it's easy to compare when you are doing a paper, wherever you are, an industrial and academic, you want to compare with the baselines, right? And so in SpeechBrain, you have baselines. So I'm still using SpeechBrain. I converted a few of my colleague to SpeechBrain as well. And it's a good tool for this. And so I'm maintaining it because I'm still using it. And so also because it's my baby and I will keep maintaining it properly. But I'm more of an advisor than a code contributor. I'm still contributing if you look at the commits and stuff. I'm fixing issues, committing new recipes and things like this. But when it comes to the core of SpeechBrain, so backbone engineering, up until now and for the next few months, we've always had engineers working on this paid for SpeechBrain, for doing SpeechBrain, which will stop, I think, unfortunately soon-ish. I don't know if I should say this, because ESPnet and all the competitors will be happy about it. Joking, of course. But getting money to hire people to work on this is hard, right? Sponsoring is the only way we could find a way to maintain it. Others have gone in different ways, right? Some people are just doing companies out of open source toolkits, raising monies and stuff. But SpeechBrain remain fully open, maintained by academics. It's a democracy. We vote for every big change. But we don't have money. It's hard, right? Like SpeechBrain has been built with maybe like 200,000 or 300,000 euros, let's say, should be in the EU right now, which is nothing. I mean, it sounds like a big amount of money. That's 300,000 euros is nothing. It's not even a national research grant, and we are one of the biggest worldwide toolkits. So I mean, it's nothing. But still, hard to get money. So I'm still involved in SpeechBrain every single day, talking with the engineers. Trying to find a solution. We should have a release soon, hopefully. We've been talking about a release for like 3 months now. Still waiting. I mean, and we've had SpeechBrain 1.0 recently, which was the biggest update for quite a while. But it's hard. This kind of project, they always... So unless you are Chingy, that has like some sort of infinite resource stream, and also it doesn't live in the same timeline as us. Like he's working 48 hours a day. So, but unless you are Chingy and so are able to push continuously new updates to ESPnets that are more and more messy. I'm still not trying to sell ESPnet here. I mean, the more things you add to this, the messier it gets. But for SpeechBrain, it has always been up and down, where we have very huge period of availabilities. And this comes down to Mirko, for instance. When Mirko is teaching, he will work much less on SpeechBrain. When I am doing something intense in Samsung, I will not put time on SpeechBrain. But then when Mirko is available, he will push a lot of things. And so you have this kind of sinusoid of contribution of the toolkit. And it's both frustrating and sometimes a bit scary as well, because you don't know when... It means that you are going down in terms of improvements and maintenance and contributions quite often, but you don't know if you will go up again. And this can be scary a bit, I think.
But yeah, thanks for the input here. And I think if it's used that prominently in Samsung and the others, chances are good, of course, that someone might recognize its value and keep maintaining it. So fingers very crossed that this important framework out there is not dying, but can live on.
Yeah, the thing is like it's not used a lot in Samsung. So people are using it, right, to do research, as I said, and that's always the same problem. So you have these things that are being used by many people around, but as soon as you change it, let's say we say, okay, now the license is research only, non-commercialized, then all the companies will stop using this and use something else that is free instead, like ESPnet, for instance, right? So yeah, I will not. So I'm both frustrated about and also angry about what I learned by doing SpeechBrain, but I cannot blame SpeechBrain entirely about this because it also gave me a part of my career. Right? When you build something like this, you get light from it. If you don't get any money, you get at least light for the glory, right? You do this for the glory, for the fame. But still, now that I have somehow fame, let's say, or at least achieved what I wanted to do in my career, it's ultra frustrating to see so many people using your tool and not contributing. And so many times you're like, why am I even doing this? Right? I mean, if you don't want to help me, at least a little bit, just see, right? I mean,
you can use this as an open forum, like to request volunteers.
Yes,
maybe.
Of course. But the thing is, like, we've been doing this for since the beginning of SpeechBrain, and we know very well why people are not contributing, right? because researchers that are using this, they build a paper and they then just go for the next one, right? They will maybe put their code in their own repository. They will not maintain it. And which is one of the good things of putting your code in SpeechBrain, because we will maintain it, right, over time. But it still needs the extra effort, which is we have some rules and we have a code quality to maintain, so that your complex pipeline before being merged into SpeechBrain will need to be reworked. And 99.9% of the time, the people don't have the time to do this. And there was an experiment done by another toolkit that is called Flower, that is doing federated learning. And they did an experiment where they actually paid people to do recipes. They offered up to $2,000, I think, per recipe. So they contacted people that have done papers using Flower, and they said, if you put your recipe in our toolkit and we spend time to do this, we will give you $2,000 to the authors directly. Even doing this, they couldn't achieve a satisfying rate of people actually doing it. So it really tells you the pressure of people are just writing nasty code, right? So that the experiment runs, they can do the paper and then they move forward. This is what, I mean, I've been doing this and most people are doing this. And this is why calling out to the world, come and help us, doesn't really work well. You need to hire someone that you pay to do this. Otherwise, well, of course it happens. I mean, if you go to the pull request, you will find plenty of things coming from the community trying to put into SpeechBrain things. But most of the time they do a PR and they never get back to it. So we do the review of the pull request and they just never do the change so that it gets accepted. So we just close it at some point because we barely have enough resources to maintain. We cannot just also...
So actually, yeah, another open source repo that you just shared with us is Flower, a friendly federated learning framework, right? Could you please elaborate a little bit on the basic idea of it and how you were involved in particular in that?
Okay, so I was involved in that. I am not anymore. Yeah. I just stress this even further. So I started working on Flower when I was a postdoc at Oxford, not Cambridge, because I was doing a few things in federated learning. And so there was this professor and someone else, so Professor Nicholas Lane, and the other guy is Daniel Bertel. And they had this toolkit doing federated learning, and they just needed some expertise from someone that already built a big and used toolkit to see how to do things and try to move forward with this. But they followed a different path because last year they just became a startup. So they just took Flower and created Flower Labs. And so Flower is still there. It's still a toolkit. And they're still, of course, pushing code into it because that will be part of the product, I guess. But now it's a startup, right? So which is also something maybe we could have done with SpeechBrain. Maybe not. It's, I think, harder. It's not the same context. But so my involvement in there was just at the beginning, helping them building the toolkit in the sense that all the things that you can think of when building a toolkit. It's quite wide. And I also did a bit of research in this area as well. But I'm not connected to Flower anymore.
So then, thanks for elaborating on the frameworks that you contributed to, and I think this is in itself alone quite some big achievement with this sustainability thought and aspect in mind, that you want to have something that is maintainable also past the next paper. Coming toward your very current research, we saw that E-SSL, Efficient Self-Supervised Learning for Inclusive and Innovative Speech Technologies, is a project that is currently still running and that you're working on. Could you just give a brief overview and elaborate a bit on what you're doing there?
Sure. So E-SSL was part of my attempt to, well, first do whatever I wanted to do when I was an associate professor in terms of research. So it's a topic of interest to me, but also an attempt to, check the boxes that are necessary so that you can become a full professor one day. So it means getting a grant. So E-SSL was my first, my first national grant based on efficient self-supervised learning. And it was being, I think, we built it on top of Le Benchmark, which was an initiative that we started when I arrived as an associate professor, if I remember correctly, in Avignon. So we just took different laboratories in France that are pretty good when it comes to speech technologies in general. So you have, so in this initiative, we had Grenoble, so the League, We had Avignon, of course. We also had Paris, and so all together we just decided to build a self-supervised learning model for French, right? Because self-supervised learning model, they require big models and they require big data sets. So we needed the expertise of everyone to just create this, and so we created the benchmark, and so we quickly attached to it also different ways of benchmarking SSL models, which is why the name the benchmark. On top of this, we realized that there was a lot of interest, so we said, okay, we can just keep this the same people and try to do a national grant where instead of just building SSL model, we will try to make them better now. Because we train these big models, right? And we have a 1 billion parameter model, so we use 100 GPUs. That's crazy. I mean, in terms of compute, it's a lot. So we just said maybe there is a better way of doing this, and this is where E-SSL started, Efficient Self-Supervised Learning Model. So I led this project, and at the same time, I also proposed a bigger version of E-SSL to what's the name again? ERC starting grants, right? Which are much more complex to have, but also much more money. And so I got rejected from here. So you see, I mean, rejection is something you get quite often. First round, I didn't even pass the first round for this one. Yeah. But for the national grant, it went through. And so the goal of this project is you have multiple axes on this project, but basically it contains a bit of theory. So trying to make self-supervised learning model more efficient to train. Right? So, can we do this? You have a lot of questions to answer here, and I think it should come from the theory. So back then when we started again, it was more about the architecture, trying to find more efficient architectures. But we did it, and I mean now it's done. Basically, we have very efficient SSL models with the current limitations of what deep learning is, which means I think there is something much better to do, but we have to reinvent SSL now. But that was the first axis, trying with the current knowledge of deep learning, trying to build something quick. And so my student did it, and well, Google did it as well. And we also did a paper last year, which will be presented at InterSpeech this year, where we invented something to use to make it faster, basically. So that was one of the axes. You have another axis that is linked to bias and fairness of SSL models as well in the evaluation process, and making sure that, of course, I mean, we are gathering such big amount of data when we train our models, and we of course have figured out that there are gender biases, there are social biases, there are many things that happens in the middle. So what can we do about this? And then another axis is how to use them in practice. These models are very big. Can we find ways of making use of them that would be faster? Because I mean, you cannot deploy a 1 billion parameter model that easily on device, right? It's not that simple. So what can we do to still use them, still benefit from them when doing this? So it's like a multi-university, multi-laboratory program. I used to be the principal investigator of this grant, but then I left when I got it. So I left Avignon. So now I'm just attached to this project because I'm co-supervising one of the PhD students in this project, but I'm not at all aware of what is being done in all the other axes anymore. Even though I conceived and invented this project, I'm not involved in it anymore.
Great. Thank you for being with us today and answering all our questions. But we have a really, really, really special question from you that comes from our previous guest, from Florian Eyben. So his question is, 50 years, will we have artificial general intelligence, or is that ever possible?
15 or 50?
50.
Oh, well, 50, yeah, I mean, most likely, yes, right. But it depends what we call AGI, really, what is the limit for AGI. I mean, I'm not an expert in this. To be 100% honest, I don't care at all about AGI, and I'm not at all interested in research topic that try to give to AI this kind of behavior of capabilities. I'm not convinced it will help us in any real way. There are many things that will be helpful, of course, when robots will be able to interact with us to do things. I don't know, wipe the floors and help older people to do things around their houses and things like this. But I believe much more, and I think quite a few researchers are also more into this direction. But I believe much more on having finally AI systems that are specialized and robust enough and fair enough, and that we can trust sufficiently to do complex tasks, but individual tasks, like having. And it doesn't mean that you need AGI to do this. Like you could like if you have a proper robot, a proper vacuum cleaning robot, right? Just this. I mean, it doesn't even work properly now. And this you can already connect it to your Google Assistant or whatever assistant, and it will work. So I think AGI, in the sense that, we have an entity that thinks like a human. In 50 years, I guess we will have it. I don't understand why we want to have this, but I guess yes, we will have it.
And is there a question relatedly that you would want to ask our next guest?
Wow. Then my question would be something along the line of, what is right now and for the next few years their biggest challenge to overcome, to make sure their solution, whatever it is, will work? And if it's linked to, as mentioned, maybe healthcare or things like this, what are the specificities of this specific domain that makes it harder than other domains?
Perfect, yeah. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us today, Titouan. So we learned such a great deal about you, and we really, really appreciate your openness, especially with difficult topics like burnout and especially the realm related to academia in this sense. So thank you so much for the discussion here. It was really a pleasure.
Well, I mean, thanks to you. I mean, it's very important what you're doing. So thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. I mean, anytime.
Thanks a lot for listening, and stay tuned for future episodes of SpeechBreach, as we might interview your favorite speech researchers. Don't forget to subscribe to wherever you're listening to your podcasts, and also follow ISKA-SAC on X and LinkedIn, where we share our latest news.
Speech pitch by ISKA-SAC.